You think you are buying the American dream, with the smell of freedom, when you finance a new Ford Mustang or an F-150 pickup. Hell no. You are buying a Chinese battery, wrapped in Mexican steel, assembled by a guy making $3 an hour. Welcome to reality, where the Made in the USA label is nothing more than a marketing budget and your own illusions. The Ford Mustang Mach-E, a symbol of power, an icon of style, made in Cuautitlan, Mexico. Do you think this is an accident? No, this is a plan. We do not build cars anymore. We slap logos on foreign erector sets. And today, I'm going to tell you exactly how we traded the world's greatest industry for cheap plastic bumpers and quarterly bonuses for top managers. To understand the scale of this catastrophe, you have to remember who we used to be. Let's go back to the 1950s. Detroit was not a set for post-apocalyptic movies back then. It was the arsenal of democracy. It was the beating heart of global capitalism. The United States of America produced 80% of all automobiles on the planet. Think about that number, 80%. One worker on a General Motors assembly line could feed a family of 4, buy a house with a lawn, own 2 cars, and send his kids to college. It was a time when General Motors earned more money than the U.S. government collected in taxes. When Detroit sneezed, the whole world looked for a handkerchief. It was a time when Made in the USA meant the thing would outlive your grandchildren, not break a week after the warranty expired. Now look out the window, or into your garage. What do we have today? Motor City looks more like the scenery from the game Fallout than a center of innovation. The ruins of the Packard plant stand as a monument to our stupidity. But the scariest part is not on the outside, it is on the inside. The modern logistics of the American auto industry is schizophrenia. The engine comes from China. The transmission floats over from Germany. The electronics fly in from Taiwan. All of this meets in Mexico, gets screwed together, and is sold to you in Ohio as a domestic product. Check the VIN code on your car. If it starts with the number 3, congratulations, your American bird speaks Spanish. General Motors got $80 billion of help from us, the taxpayers, to save jobs. And what did they do? They closed the plant in Lordstown, Ohio, and immediately opened a new one in Ramos Arizpe, Mexico. Beautiful. Simply geniuses of patriotism. Let me explain what happened with a simple example. Imagine the heavyweight boxing champion of the world, Mike Tyson in his prime. But instead of training, he starts selling his gloves, his helmet, his punching bag, and even his shorts. Why? To buy chips, beer, and a new leather sofa. He lies there, getting fat, watching TV. And when it is time to fight for the title, he hires the neighbor's teenage kid to fight for him, but under his name. The neighbor fights, gets punched in the face, but he gets the experience too. And our champion just pays him spare change and keeps the trophies on his shelf. That is the modern General Motors. We forgot how to turn wrenches, but we learned how to virtuously spin financial reports. While Toyota engineers were improving engines, Ford lawyers were improving tax evasion schemes. This is not a natural death. This is suicide, committed with extreme cynicism. You think Tesla will save everyone? Oh, we will get to Elon Musk. Things are not so smooth there either. But first, let's figure out how we ended up in this mess in the first place. How did the country that put the world on wheels become just an assembly shop for foreign technologies? Sit back. I am going to show you the anatomy of betrayal. We are going to lance this boil, layer by layer, and believe me, you are not going to like the smell. But you are not here for bedtime stories, right? You want to know exactly who sold your future. June 1st, 2009, New York, 8 o'clock in the morning. General Motors, the pride of the nation, files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was the largest industrial bankruptcy in the history of the United States. The company's debts stood at $173 billion. Think about that. $173 billion. At the same time, President Barack Obama is giving a grandiose speech about saving the soul of American industry. Taxpayers, that means you and me, are handing over $49.5 billion just for General Motors. In total, the auto industry received over $80 billion. And what was the result on the ground? While lawyers on Wall Street were popping champagne for the fattest fee in history, workers in Michigan were locking their lockers forever. Plants in Lordstown and Janesville stopped their assembly lines. This was presented as a rescue. But who exactly were they saving? Definitely not the guy with the wrench. You have to understand who was lying in the coffin. It wasn't just another corporation. It was the _6_ General Motors, Ford, Chrysler. They created the American middle class. They were the arsenal of democracy in World War II, switching from sedans to tanks in a couple of months. In the 60s, they controlled 90% of the U.S. market. Charles Wilson once said a phrase that became legendary, quote, 7. They didn't just make cars, they built a way of life. They invented the automatic transmission, air conditioning in the cabin, airbags. Well, almost invented. The main point is, they were the backbone of the economy. Every seventh worker in the U.S. was somehow connected to the auto industry. And this giant fell to its knees and begged for charity. What was the official version? Oh, you heard it 1,000 times. Blame the greedy unions. These arrogant workers wanted pensions that were too big and medical insurance. Top management and business newspapers like the Wall Street Journal sang in unison, "We cannot compete with the Japanese, who do not have such social obligations." The version for the press was as simple as a McDonald's hamburger. Joe the worker wants too much money, so the company is sinking. They told us, quote 10, they explained that closing factories in America and moving them to China and Mexico was the only way to survive. Sounds logical? Sure, if you are an idiot. But stop. Wait a second. If manufacturing in America is so expensive and unprofitable, why the hell is Toyota building plant after plant right here? Why is Honda calmly assembling its Civics in Ohio? The Toyota Camry at that time was the most _11_ car by the number of localized parts. The Japanese pay American workers in Kentucky excellent wages, comply with environmental standards, and still make a profit. Yet Chevrolet claims this is impossible. Someone is lying here, and lying big time. Why can the Japanese organize production in the U.S., but American managers cannot? Maybe the problem isn't the workers' wages, but the competence of those sitting in leather chairs? Let's look further. Detail number 2, the Mexican Shuffle. General Motors gets $50 billion of state aid under the slogan, quote, 13. And what happens right after that? They close the Lordstown assembly plant in Ohio. Thousands of people on the street. And at the exact same time, literally in the same months, General Motors invests billions of dollars to expand the plant in Ramos Arizpe, Mexico. The Chevrolet Blazer model, which was supposed to be made in Ohio, is now made there. You gave me money to treat my grandmother, and I bought a ticket to Cancun and put Grandma in a shelter. That is roughly what General Motors did to the American people. Officially, they called it, quote, 14. In reality, it was betrayal at the expense of the victim. And here is the cherry on top: the iconic Ford Mustang, a symbol of American freedom and power. Open the hood, the MT82 manual transmission, made in China. It crunches, it breaks. Owners have been suing Ford for years. The electronics? Taiwan and China. The new electric Mustang Mach-E is assembled in Mexico. How did it happen that in the symbol of the American auto industry, the only American thing left is the badge and the bloated marketing budget? Why did Ford decide that a Chinese transmission in a muscle car is a good idea? Savings? Or something worse? You open the door of a legend, and quote 15 stares back at you. The official version about quote 16 and quote 17 has crumbled to dust. It is not that producing in America is unprofitable. Toyota proved the opposite. The point is that someone decided that producing it themselves was no longer necessary. This is not a calculation error. This is a strategy. This is not an accident. This is a plan. The bankruptcy of 2009 was not the beginning of the end. It was just the final chord of a play that started being written much earlier. To find the real killer, we need to stop looking at the closed factory gates and look into the boardroom 30 years ago. Forget about 2009. The real murder happened when America blinked for the first time. Let's rewind to the 70s and 80s. Stop. Throw 2009 out of your head. That is the date on the death certificate, not the date of the murder. The corpse started rotting 30 years before that. Bankruptcy was just the moment the money to hide the smell ran out. To understand how Detroit turned into ruins, we need to move from the factory floor to an office paneled in expensive oak. And rewind time 30 years. We need to understand the system that made destroying your own factories the most profitable business in the world. Transport to the 80s, the era of Reaganomics, a time when greed was declared a virtue. That was when the concept that would kill the American auto industry was born. Quote 18. Before, the goal of a company was simple: make a good product to make a profit. Good car, happy customer, lots of money. Logical? Yes. But in the 80s, everything changed. Now the goal became different. Raise the stock price at any cost, here and now. The product became a side effect. If you can raise the stock by making bad cars, make bad cars. The ideologues of this madness were economist Milton Friedman and Jack Welch from General Electric. Engineers on boards of directors began to be mass replaced by financiers with MBA degrees. People who knew the price of everything but understood the value of nothing. Wall Street started demanding quarterly growth. Every 3 months, you have to show more profit than the last time. But here is the problem. Making cars is a long, expensive, and risky business. Developing a new model takes from 48 to 60 months. 5 years. And the stock market wants growth every 3 months. The conflict is obvious. Long-term investment in quality kills short-term profit. If you invest $1 billion in a new engine, your profit drops today. The stock drops. You get fired. If you cut spending on a new engine, Your profit rises today. The stock rises. You get a bonus. What will a hired manager choose? The answer is obvious. And so the first players of this drama step onto the stage. Jack Welch, nicknamed Quote 19, becomes a style icon. He fired people by the thousands, closed profitable but Quote 20 factories to raise the stock by a couple of points. General Motors and Ford started copying this model like they were hypnotized. Roger Smith, CEO of General Motors in the 80s, was the first to start looking at cars purely as numbers in an Excel spreadsheet. Instead of improving cars, he started buying non-core assets, electronic data systems, Hughes aircraft. He was playing Monopoly while Chevrolet quality fell to the bottom. The result? General Motors' market share crashed from 46% to 35%. But Roger Smith's bonuses were just fine. A conflict of interest began that can be called a war. Finance versus quality. To raise the stock today, you need to cut costs. The biggest expense in America is the American worker. $28 an hour plus insurance. The war with the unions begins, alongside a feverish search for cheap labor. If you are an engineer, you want to put a part in the suspension that will last 10 years. If you are a financier, you want a part that will last exactly the warranty period and costs 2 cents less. If you multiply 2 cents by 5 million cars, you get a huge bonus. In this war, the men in suits who never changed oil in their lives won. They decided that quality was too expensive a luxury. Now look at the map. The Great Exodus. Let's move to the border of the U.S. and Mexico. 1994. On January 1st, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, comes into force. President Bill Clinton smiled and promised prosperity for everyone. In reality, it opened the floodgates. Along the border, maquiladoras sprang up, assembly plants in a duty-free zone. Mexico became the new promised land for American corporations. What is the physical interest? Money, of course. Labor cost arbitrage. In Detroit, a worker gets $28 an hour. In Mexico, in the border zone, it is $2 or $3 an hour. The robots are the same. The assembly lines are the same. Assembly quality is acceptable. And the margin shoots into space. The savings on one car range from $1,500 to $2,500 in net profit. Factories start growing in Mexico like poisonous mushrooms after rain. Ford in Hermosillo, General Motors in Ramos Arizpe. American brands, Mexican hands, offshore accounts. The colonial machine began working at full power. Globalization turned into legalized robbery. The mechanism is sickeningly simple. Close a plant in Michigan, fire 3,000 people with good salaries. Open a plant in Mexico, hire 3,000 people for pennies. Put the difference in money, not into technology development, but into top management's pockets through bonuses and stock buybacks. The American worker loses his job and house. The Mexican worker works for peanuts in harsh conditions. The top manager buys a third yacht. Everyone wins, except the people who actually work. Hundreds of thousands of jobs vanished from the U.S. in the 90s. Corporate profits were at record highs. There was resistance, but it was mocked. Billionaire Ross Perot warned during the debates in 1992. He said a phrase that became prophetic, quote, 23. They laughed at him. They called him paranoid, a senile old man who doesn't understand the new economy. Now we know he was right, down to the last letter. Millions of families in the Rust Belt heard that sound. And now, the hardest part: financial engineering. There is a term, stock buyback. Sounds smart? Let me explain it to you on your fingers, as if we are sitting in a bar. Imagine a farmer. He had a great harvest, and now he has a sack of money. The farmer has two paths. Option A, engineering. The farmer buys a new tractor, fixes the leaking barn roof, buys the best seeds and fertilizer. Next year, the harvest will be even bigger. But this is boring, long, and nobody applauds right now. Option B, financial, meaning the buyback. The farmer takes the whole sack of money and goes to the dentist. He puts in gold teeth. Then he buys an expensive suit and throws a party for the neighbors. The neighbors are the investors. They are thrilled. Wow, what a rich farmer! The value of his farm is skyrocketing. The farmer looks cool. He feels like a rich man. But here is the problem. The tractor is old and broken. The barn is leaking. The grain is rotting. They bought the cheapest seeds. Next year, there is no harvest. The farmer is bankrupt. There is nothing to eat. But the gold teeth remain in his mouth. These gold teeth are the manager's bonuses. General Motors and Ford did exactly this. Instead of developing new engines or hybrids like Toyota did, they spent billions of dollars buying back their own shares from investors. This artificially inflated the stock price, allowing managers to get giant bonuses. They ate their own future. It is called cannibalism. You eat your own leg to satisfy your hunger. Do you think they invested in electric cars in the 2000s? No. They invested in their gold teeth. Now let's tie this to the event from Chapter 2. Back to General Motors on the eve of 2008. By this time, the company is an empty shell. The finance department has won completely. Engineers are backed into a corner and afraid to make a peep. To maintain the illusion of success, managers invent genius schemes. For example, in 1999, they spun off the company Delphi. General Motors separated all its parts factories into a separate firm just to bankrupt it a couple of years later and cut workers' wages in half. This was the beginning of the end for the quality of American components. When the crisis of 2008 hit, General Motors had no, quote, 27. All the money was spent on buybacks. From 2005 to 2008, they spent more than $10 billion on stock buybacks. $10 billion. That money could have gone into creating the best electric cars in the world, but it went down the drain. The product line consisted of gas-guzzling Hummers that no one bought when oil was expensive. The bankruptcy of 2009 didn't happen because of the mortgage crisis. It happened because the farmer drank away the seeds and broke the tractor. The treasury was empty when winter came. The system is clear. They emptied the register, sold the factories to Mexico, and inflated the stock to line their pockets before the crash. But that isn't all. There is one more piece of the puzzle, the scariest one: China. How did we raise a monster with our own hands that will now eat us? We didn't just give away jobs. We sold the keys to the technologies of the future for pennies. That is in the next chapter. Remember we said that General Motors' top managers gutted the company for bonuses? Well, now you understand the context. But financial schemes are half the trouble. You can print money. You can rebuild factories. The main crime is the sale of the key to the future. While we were looking at factory closures in 2009, the real theft happened much earlier and quieter. You think Detroit was killed by bad cars? No. It was killed because its heart was stolen. While you argued about the quality of plastic in the interior, General Motors was selling the technology without which a modern car simply won't drive. I am talking about a specific deal you have likely never heard of: the MagnaQuench deal. In 1982, General Motors scientists invented neodymium magnets. These are the strongest permanent magnets in the world. This is the heart of any modern electric motor. Power windows, power steering, power seats. These magnets are needed everywhere. But most importantly, they are needed for electric car engines and for the guidance systems of Javelin and Tomahawk missiles. This was a strategic technology, a U.S. monopoly. And what does General Motors do? In 1995, they sell the MagnaQuench division. They sell the patent, the plant in Indiana, the technologies, the research center. To whom? The Sextant Group Consortium. The price tag? A laughable $70 million. $70 million for a technology that defines the 21st century. The buyers swore to keep the plant in the U.S. for at least 5 years. General Motors wasn't killed for bad marketing. The American auto industry didn't lose the electric car race in 2020. It lost it in 1995, when it sold the production of neodymium magnets to the Chinese for $70 million. Without these magnets, not a single Tesla moves, not a single Ford Lightning. We handed them the weapon they are now killing us with. Who was behind this deal? On the facade was an American, Archibald Cox Jr., the son of that Watergate prosecutor. The perfect screen. But the real puppeteers were 2 Chinese companies: San Juan New Material and China National Non-Ferrous Metals. Behind San Juan stood the family of the son-in-law of Deng Xiaoping, the leader of China at the time. Deng Xiaoping had a strategy, quote 30. They understood that the future was not in gasoline, but in magnets and batteries. They played the long game. They used American greed against Americans. While General Motors wanted to close a quarterly report with a plus of $70 million, China was building an empire for 50 years ahead. They used Cox to bypass the Committee on Foreign Investment check, and we swallowed it. The moment of truth came exactly 1 day after the 5-year contract expired. It is 2001. Chinese specialists arrived in Anderson, Indiana. American workers stood and watched as their unique machines were dismantled, packed into wooden crates, and loaded into containers. All the equipment went to Tianjin. The plant was closed. 450 high-class specialists, scientists, and engineers were fired. The U.S. lost its only supermagnet production. The workers weren't crying about losing their jobs. They were crying because they understood. America just handed over the keys to the future. The machines sailed away. The patents sailed away. And we were left with cheap plastic bumpers and politicians' promises. Who won? Today, China controls 92% of the global production of neodymium magnets. The beneficiaries are Chinese giants BYD and CATL. The entire Chinese auto industry stands on the shoulders of this technology. Now, Ford and General Motors are forced to buy these magnets from China. We sold the technology for $70 million, and now we pay billions to get the product back. It reached the point of absurdity. The newest F-35 fighter jet flew with Chinese magnets because the Pentagon simply didn't have its own. General Motors cannot make its motor without Beijing's permission. We became dependent junkies, and the dealer is our main geopolitical rival. Now the puzzle is complete. The financiers emptied the treasury, the engineers were fired, and the technologies were sold to the adversary for pennies. We created the monster ourselves that is now devouring us. It remains to draw the line. So who ended up the fool? And who hit the jackpot? Let's be honest. It wasn't just the abstract auto industry that lost. Engineering America lost. Detroit, as the symbol of the arsenal of democracy, is dead. The American worker lost everything: his stability, his pension, his pride. His middle class was sawed up into bonuses for top management. We didn't just lose factories. We lost competence. We forgot how to make complex things. Engineers who could send a man to the moon are now driving taxis for Uber or working as stalkers at Amazon. Because you don't have to pay a taxi driver a pension, and robots in a warehouse don't need a union, Detroit didn't die of natural causes. It was smothered with a pillow stuffed with stock certificates. And who won? The people in expensive suits won. The boards of directors of the Big Three became multi-millionaires by destroying their own companies. They sold the keys to the house to eat at an expensive restaurant once, and they are satisfied. But the main winner is China. Chinese conglomerates BYD, CATL, and San Juan won everything. They bought the future for the price of scrap metal, $70 million for the magnets. Now they control 92% of the market. China didn't steal our future. We carried it out to a garage sale ourselves, slapped a discount sticker on it, and helped load it into the car. The system works perfectly. Money flows up, technology flows east, and problems stay at the bottom. Remember where we started? With the metaphor about the boxer champion who sold his gloves and gym to buy chips and a new sofa? He lay there thinking he was the smartest guy. He hired the neighbor's kid to fight for him. We thought the neighbor would just be cheap labor, that he would forever take bruises for our trophies. But reality turned out scarier than any metaphor. It turned out that while the champion slept on his sofa, the neighbor signed the house over to himself. The neighbor didn't just learn to fight. He bought our gym, took our medals, and is now standing over the sofa with a baseball bat. The neighbor kid is China. The sofa is our financial economy. The chips are the cheap imports we comfort ourselves with. General Motors thought it was using China. Reality? China used General Motors as a technology incubator and then threw away the empty shell. The financiers thought they were the masters of the ring. But the ring is the factory, and they don't have factories anymore. You cannot eat stocks. You cannot drive on quarterly profit reports. In the end, the only thing that matters is what you can make with your own hands. The circle has closed. The world's greatest industrial power has become the world's greatest consumer of other people's labor. We started with pride in the label, quote, 34, and ended with the fact that there is nothing American in our product except the seller's greed. There are no simple answers. The world is not ruled by democratic values or beautiful brands. The world is ruled by physical supply chains. He who holds the magnet, the battery, and the chip in his hands has the one who only has a logo and a marketing department by the balls. The stock market can paint any numbers, but physics is ruthless. If you don't have a magnet, your Tesla is just a beautiful brick on wheels. The truth is that we have become a technological colony of our former workers. This knowledge won't bring the factories back to Detroit, but it will help you understand why your car costs more and breaks more often. This is the difference between paper wealth and real wealth, and we chose paper. If you watched until the end, my respect. It is easier for most to believe in fairy tales about a green future and the genius of Elon Musk. It is harder to admit that we slept through the real revolution while counting dividends. You chose to know the truth. It is a lonely path, but it is the path of an adult. Now you see not just a car, you see the scheme. Next time they try to sell you the American dream, don't be lazy. Check the badge. Most likely, it will say, quote, 37. And that will be the only truth for your money. Don't let yourself be fooled by a pretty wrapper. Look for the physical interest. Talk soon.